Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. For tonight, I wanted to look at the idea of time and not its position in the world, but also in the world behind the eyes of the human being and the human mind. And so, suffering seems to be the big challenge of this world. Whoever you are, wherever you live, due to the temporary nature of our biological existence, suffering is unavoidable in the long term. But in the short term, suffering, in accordance to how the moment is used, can become an opportunity where in all that time where the person is technically suffering, we are kind of born to die, and we're dying to be born, dying to be alive, dying to go towards the new. So I would say there is an unavoidable biological dissolution. Now, we don't mind that. I think most people have accepted the nature of nature, that it begins and then it ends. But while this biological suffering is extended out in a long, like imagine a long line, okay, from the beginning of the person's birth to when they exit this plane of existence. You can say the outer realms, this long-term overall suffering, the inner realms lives a life in the suffering of the inner realm. The mind is living way more lives than just our body. Our body is, you can say, one lifetime. The mind is seeing not only probabilities to the moment, but it's just that the body will one day end. And so we are left with trying to resolve the mystery of the mind. The body, whatever mystery I have, whatever thought a person has on the body will, like snow in the melting sun, one day leave, one day fade. So let me actually start off by saying it like this. Human beings, we are engaged with suffering. There is two types of suffering. There is a suffering that is from your outer realms, and then there is a suffering from your inner realms. Both the suffering in the outer realms can be from two positions. Your suffering from the outer realms can be because of yourself, or it can be because of the world. Maybe you're like born in the wrong time in history. Maybe you're born in the wrong neighborhood. Maybe you're just born in a setting, in a certain landscape where the suffering is coming from the outer realms. For me, a philosopher I have incredible respect for is Viktor Frankl. And from his philosophy, from his writings, there was one sentence he said that even suffering has a meaning. And Viktor Frankl, I don't know how many people know, but he was a person who was a survivor of the concentration camps in Germany. And so can you imagine someone suffering in that intensity, yet still seeing meaning? Like there is a meaning to get out of hell, you know? So anyways, there was a sort of outer suffering, and then there was an inner suffering. And Viktor Frankl was that very strong charactered human being who managed to see hell in the outer realms but found heaven in the inner realms, I would say. Sometimes hope is the only rope you can hold on to. So, anyways, in the outer realms, there's a suffering that you generate, there's a suffering that the world generates, you find yourself in it. Similarly, in the inner realm, the content of your inner realm, for example, now that I'm speaking, um, there is there's a response from your outer realms to your inner realms, from me, from my voice. But I would say it's as if like me speaking, that's something coming from the, how would I say it? The same thing is happening for the mind. There's self-generated movements in the inner realm, and there's moments where thoughts come and go as if it's just weather. Like, what can you do about, a cloud passing in the air? Sometimes thoughts come and go. The biggest error is when the person identifies with the thought, and that's you're done. The moment you identify with language, you're chained by it. You're defined by it. What does that mean? I'll give you an example. Any person who has identified with their name, with the letters of their name. Anytime they hear that name, their head moves. Your attention will move anytime you hear that name. I'll give you an example. My real name is Amin, Amin. You don't know how many times people have said I mean, and like in a sentence, like I mean this, I mean that. And my ear, somehow my attention's just suddenly gone to hearing that sound. As if an identification with sound. What are names? They are symbols behind our eyes, and in our outer realms, they're sounds. So technically, all our names are accessed as sounds. Who knew? Everybody's identifying with sound, in this vast silence. In cosmic silence, creatures have dared speak. It's like the podcaster found an enlightened yogi, and the podcaster was like, so let me get this straight. Are you telling me that God is podcasting through everything? The Atman, the Parabrahman, is moving all the efforts of the Atman? You know? Suffering that is from your outer realms and suffering that is from your inner realms. It can be self-created or world-created. If you can't forgive the world, the outer realm, you will suffer. If you can't serve your outer realms, you will suffer. And you will suffer because you will feel you're a candle which its light is going to waste. That is the suffering of not serving the world while you're alive. You will feel suddenly there was an opportunity, but was it responded to? That on a pebble in a light beam in the middle of nowhere, 8 billion creatures are, you know, entertaining themselves with language that was hollow from the beginning. I will tell you, human progress, until it has comprehended the void, is nothing. We are intelligent space as much as we are the intelligence in the manifest material of the space. You see, your eyes are a gift. Now, if you can open them, then you can actually access the gift. excuse me, to continue. So I'm saying there's two, let's say, two types of suffering, and again, to each type, two types of way where the suffering can be created. Now, suffering from the outer realms that's coming from the world, you can't do anything. Suffering that's coming from the self in the outer realms, that means you're causing your own suffering in the outer realms, that can be stopped. And that's really where wisdom comes in. Where the person sees that they're, for example, I don't know, if you are sitting on a chair that's about to break, let's hope not. Let's say if you're sitting on a chair that's about to break and you know it's gonna break, if you don't get off that chair, you suffer. That's self-created suffering. But if you are like born in a part of the world that's just messed up or whatever, like that's the outer realms. You can't do anything about that. Now this is for the world in the outer realms. The suffering that you got to kind of pretty much accept and efficiently strategize to advance beyond. But the suffering of the outer realms that starts from you, it can have instant resolution. So to some degree, I mean, the body. Keep in mind that the body, long term, that is suffering in a sense, but perspective is what frees us from that. Now, when it comes to the inner realm, um, what you cause in the inner realm instantaneously as a self, uh, it can instantly change, and stuff that comes from the inner realm, suffering that comes from the inner realm, that too, I don't want to say it can be instantly changed, but one can change how they interpret the moment instantly. So I would say suffering that is not object based, it can be resolved very quickly. Suffering that is object based needs specific techniques. Now, how does time come into suffering? We suffer because we are something and we may not be that. We suffer when we don't change in accordance to our free will. The ideological creature, the I thought, it suffers the burden of being a conditional form in an unconditional situation. If we reject intelligence in the unknown, we will scare ourselves to extinction. The I thought is where time begins, where a point of reference begins. So let's think that the human being that is born, it is going on. Imagine your face. Okay, imagine you have a camera and your face is behind the camera. You can only see through the camera lens. And so different moments of your life, you have just taken a picture, taken a picture, taken a picture. When you were 5 years old, you walked, you took a picture. When you played, you walked, all that, you took a picture. When you were like 15 years old, you took a picture. When you were 25, you took a picture. Do you see what I mean? That means all these reference kind of layers and points of reference of how a self has existed in a world, right? So all of these are accumulated. So I would say the suffering for the inner realms, if there is the case, it has to do with what is the point of the whole world. Because when a person closes their eyes and there is no visuals, there is no location. Without visual sensory perception, there is no location. And if there is a location, we cannot see the location as it is. That means imagine right now. Okay, I'll not imagine. I'll tell you. Like there are certain shamanic tribes. Let's say tribes in certain primitive parts of the world, that their tradition is that when a child is born, they don't let the child leave a dark cave, like pitch black darkness, for until the child is 18. Can you imagine living 18 years inside a cave? You've never seen sunlight, you've never seen like trees, nature. You're just starting off as a creature in darkness, right? For 18 years, this Amazonian tribe would do this. After 18, the child would go. Now, one thing off the bat, you can totally see why the people would be short, right? But that child will not be scared of darkness. If you have lived 18 years in pitch black darkness and you suddenly see there is more, it would literally be like your eyes have been closed for 18 years, then they open. Now, with all the knowledge our species has attained, we're wondering, can the eyes open again? That means, like, look at something, then close your eyes. Do you see how all that visual data, that visual cellular what's the term I'm looking for? Light is giving your eyes a world. When we close our eyes, that content, that layer, that shape, it becomes blurry. It's as if we can't see the outer realms. Now, I would say, what if all of our senses, 5 senses, were fully active? What if still our eyes are closed? What if whoever on this planet has felt that they have seen something, they have accessed the truth? What if it was the case that, like a Rubik's Cube, unless there were collective events activated, the right picture wouldn't come about? Sometimes I feel we all have access to our individual biological eyes, but also simultaneously access to an energetic field where all of our knowing is non-local. It has no location. That means you can say one idea that suggests the universe is alive because it doesn't need to store itself. You see, there is a paradox in the idea of existence of what is holding it all together. We say forces. Forces are keeping this whole universe here. Now, we say there was space, and then forces appeared, or there was a potential, or there was unknown. Eventually, it comes to nothing firm. There is no truth before the receiver of truth. Before we were human beings, we couldn't suffer. Only now that we are human, from potential, unknown cosmic energy, call it whatever you like, non-existence, non-existence is potential. Technically, we're all that, Who knew emptiness had the human species in mind? Time is a unit. A unit is ascribed to something that is contained. We are containing life in a specific way, and that causes us suffering, I find, in a world that is changing. Human beings are fighting over belief systems. We're fighting over what to believe to be true. I feel this is an ultimate distraction. Truth is the biggest distraction. The belief of truth, not truth, the concept. I would say the belief. What can you believe in the void? It's all just probabilities that animate. There's no such thing. I mean, it doesn't even help you to believe something or disbelieve it. It's as if they say, it's like someone comes up to you and says, "Hey man, you know that mythological horse that had wings?" And you're like, "Yeah, you mean Pegasus?" And the person's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, it's behind you." And so you would, in that moment, look at that person and be like, "I don't believe you." Or you might be like having waited to see a Pegasus your whole life and you're like, "Okay, I believe you, instantly." But unless you turn around and see for yourself, the belief is a distraction from the actuality of what is going on. That means if a fear arises and that fear is not is not responded to directly, instantaneously, then I would say, in a world where there is a fear, there is there is illusions ad infinitum. Because some part of the self was left behind and a door wasn't open. Fear is like a door. Many things in this nature, when it comes to the forces, known forces interacting with unknown forces, the only way you can communicate as being something that is not an object is by trust. When I say trust, I don't mean faith. Faith is what the word we give when it's to a linguistic relationship with the cosmic structure. There is nothing to have faith, though maybe somebody could say you have faith in the unknown. I would accept that. But aside from that, when it comes to actually wondering how the person is not being an object in the moment, there is, like, what opinion can we have on space? It's like, who can write an essay on empty space? The essay should be one sentence. It's empty. That's... Oh, man. In this elemental circus, we're wondering why we're caught in the act of individual conscious living. I would say if the concept of time wasn't there, anybody who's listening, you can try this out. For a moment, just act as if there's no such thing as time. You've never heard of the idea of time. It would just be this moment. And then from the simplicity of your presence in this moment, begin wondering what is an inner realm problem, what is an outer realm problem. You see, there are some people who, I mean, maybe I should say it like this. there are those who, when they experience emotions, they have to respond to the emotion. They have to react to the emotion. They have to respond to the emotion, and there are some who don't respond to the emotion. The emotion comes and it goes and it changes nothing. That means imagine you are like, the mind is like a person's house being a tunnel where both of the ends of the tunnel are open, but it's a person's house. It is what they are inhabiting, but this space has a lot of content that comes and goes irrelevant to the tunnel. That means a lot of, let's say, oh, okay, let's use the tunnel example. Like, let's say there's a tunnel, a lot of cars pass through it, but the tunnel isn't the car. Now, the issue is that our minds are like the tunnel, and all the exchange and experiences and all the phenomena happening in the realm is like the cars passing through, and when the tunnel thinks it's the car, it suffers. And this is the most ridiculous example I've ever. It's like, imagine a religious child suddenly, not like, uh, believing in God, and the father comes and says, "Son, why?" And the son is like, "Father, God doesn't know what he's doing," you know, and the father is shocked. Imagine. The father is shocked and says, "Son, how could you say that? Do you know? The book made it very clear. We're all, everything is in its will." And the son, imagine, looked at the father and said, "If God had made everything perfect, God wouldn't need a message. If God had not made mistakes, from the beginning man should have known." I'll share with you guys a script I wrote when I was in film school. It was called The Offices of the Afterlife. And it was about this kid who he goes home, and there's a sort of Christian household. And the kid goes home, and and the lights are off and everything, and the kid goes there, and the father is in the room. And the father calls his son. He says, "Son," and the father's under a blanket, this kind of voice where you think like, "Oh my God, the father's old and suffering," And the voice says, "Son, please come in," Like, he calls the son. The son goes in, and the son's like, "Yes, father," right? And the father shouts at the son, "Get a job!" And the father gets up, and the father was a night shift security guard who was just sleeping in the day. There's some hilarious scene there. Now, the whole point is this kid walks into this bookstore, something happens, this bookshelf falls and whatnot. And the kid finds himself in this office, and this is where the idea of offices of the afterlife come in. The kid finds himself in an office, and he's waiting, and then there's this goth, kind of like Japanese cyberpunk girl at the front, at the reception. And he's found himself in a suit, and there's a briefcase beside him, and he's never had a briefcase. And he opens the briefcase, he just sees a mirror in there. you know? Long story short, the receptionist is supposed to be Ezreal, the angel of death, the archetype for Ezreal. And the angel of death looks at, what do you call it? This kid, and He's escorted to the hallway. If I remember correctly, he goes to the interview room. There's one door where it has crosses, and as he's passing this hallway in this office, every room has the name of every archangel, in the Abrahamic religions, And when it comes to one of the angels named, the fallen angel, the room is crossed with like police, with like police tape. That room is closed. And then the kid goes to the main room at the end, and the end room says God. And he goes in there and he sits down, and God is sitting across from him at a table. And God is this old man. And he tells him, kid, why should I hire you? I have your lifetime resume here. And he tells the kid that you did nothing in your life. You didn't do enough bad things to go to hell, and you didn't do enough good things to, in some sense, go to heaven. And the thing is, offices of the afterlife, so God is trying to hire this kid. I wanted to kind of send out this message that the economical sector has become the main object of modern worship. But anyways, the kid goes there, and there's a scene where God tells him, you're not qualified, you don't have enough experience to come into the afterlife. And it's there where I wrote one of the coolest things. I wish I could find the text here now. But what it was is the kid looks at God, and I brought up a theological point. The kid says, God, how can you not hire me when you created me? Do you know? And there's this intense pause. And there's a scene where the God starts laughing and says, you got guts, kid, like some kind of situation like this, and the kid wakes up back into reality, right? Hopefully one day I'll be able to make this film, but I'll tell you, the whole point of it is that man creates himself in air. And I honestly feel that if there was no this illusion, if language wasn't here, we would die of boredom. We had to create the illusion because the truth wasn't enough. Not that the truth wasn't here. What can I say? If time wasn't here, there couldn't be a character in a story. If there was no character in a story, there wouldn't be the basic thing required for suffering to occur. And so I would say this is the truth of the mystical algorithm. That it's not you found the truth, it's that the questioner was never there. And that is truth. That from the beginning, we have been in the seventh sky. From the beginning, even if you are a person in a theological, if you are a part of a theological crowd, religious crowd, I will tell you, ask yourself where earth was made. Where did God make earth? And if you are in a secular, secular audience, I will tell you, ask yourself, where was the world made? And you will see you can give one answer to both crowds. Earth was made in the heavens. That is it. That either we attempt the most advanced opportunity while we're alive, or why was the opportunity given? Somebody once asked me, what's your motivation for giving these Mr. Within talks, and like all that you do? Why are you, like, pretty much somebody asked me, why are you alive? And I was at that moment feeling like that is the most deepest, rudest thing to ask. But I'm joking. It's not rude. But the question of what is my motivation. It's like, I would give you this example. Imagine you suddenly opened your eyes. You had a wrench in your hand, and you were standing beside a bunch of mechanics in like a car shop or something. Do you know? So then it's like asking, what is the point of being a mechanic? What is the purpose of consciousness in this moment? And you see, it's as if the person doesn't use the wrench, doesn't use what is given, then why is it here? It's like, what is the purpose of a body? To move it. What is the purpose of a mind? To move the world. The mind is moving worlds before we actually move in the world. And here we stand in our stories of suffering, people fighting over subjective glory. Language is in the driver's seat. We will tap into a new technology. That's one thing we can say, that history has given us a lot of evidence that the new eventually arrives. So what it means is that the approach to some sort of, I don't know, global collective efficiency would be individual efficiency maxed out, patience. Patience until the collective starts making moves. And when I say the collective starts making moves, that means imagine a bunch of architects made civilization. Now imagine we realize we have 8 billion architects. And so would we rather wonder about what great structure the 8 billion can build, or just the few architects from the past? For me, honestly, knowledge and the educational system, there is no such thing. There's learning should not be the point of the educational system. I'm telling you, the educational system should just become a giant brain. It should be neural interconnectivity between all branches of knowledge. I'm telling you, if they make the educational system more resemble a video game where the children have to go solve quests, it will be way more remarkable. I personally find that the purpose of animate life is to serve the animate world. If you're alive, you are required to serve the living. Plato said time is the. What am I doing? I'm just going to a quote now. Plato said time is the moving image of eternity, but let's just read everything, a bunch of quotes from people who have talked about time. Okay. Napoleon Hill says, "Don't wait. The time will never be just. The time will never be just right." Leonardo da Vinci, "Time abides long enough for those who make use of it." Here, guys, Da Vinci is saying as if time is generated from the inner realms. So you can have as much time you need to do whatever. Marcus Aurelius, "Time is a sort of river of passing events, and strong is its current. No sooner is a thing brought to sight than it is swept by, and another takes its place, and this too will be swept away." Bruce Lee says if you spend too much time thinking about a thing, you'll never get it done. Emily Dickinson, guys, this quote is so incredible. I feel if there was a museum of language in the future, this should definitely go into it. Emily Dickinson says, "Forever is composed of nows." Saint Augustine, "What then is time? If no one asks me, I know what it is. If I wish to explain it to him who asks, I do not know." Bertrand Russell, "The time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time." Well said. Albert Einstein, "The only reason for time is so that everything doesn't happen at once." Without time, existence would have nothing to divide experience. Time is like one of the basic foundations of the architecture of personality, of personhood, of all the states. Everything I can say, time gives the permission to create a vast plane, to move it. William Shakespeare says, "Like as the waves make towards the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end." Albert Einstein says, "I have just got a new theory of eternity." That's Einstein for you. A lot of yogis and mystics around the world were like, No way Einstein just said that. No way Einstein. Elizabeth 1. The past cannot be cured. Benjamin Franklin. You may delay, but time will not. Benjamin Franklin says lost time is never found again. Henry David Thoreau. Time is but the stream I go a-fishing in. Martin Luther King Jr. We must use time creatively. Abraham Lincoln. You can fool all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. William Shakespeare says we are time's subjects, and time bids be gone. George Bernard Shaw, everything happens to everybody sooner or later if there is time enough. John F. Kennedy says we must use time as a tool, not as a couch. Henry Ford, most people spend more time and energy going around problems than in trying to solve them. Yes, this is so true. I'm a Tesla fan, but I'll post this quote, C.S. Lewis says the future is something which everyone reaches at the rate of 60 minutes an hour, whatever he does, whoever he is. John Wooden says if you don't have the time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? Dr. Seuss. How did it get so late so soon? It's night before it's afternoon. December is here before it's June. My goodness, how time has flown. How did it get so late so soon? Maybe Dr. Seuss lived in Japan as a Zen master. I don't know. Malcolm X says in all our deeds, the proper value and respect for time determine success or failure. Sophocles says old age and the passage of time teach all things. Francis Bacon says friends are thieves of time. Agatha Christie says everything that has existed lingers in the eternity. Aeschylus says time brings all things to pass, Aeschylus says, but time growing old teaches all things. Robert H. Schuller says tough times never last, but tough people do. Jean de La Fontaine says patience and time do more than strength or passion. Virgil says time is flying, never to return. Horace Mann says lost yesterday somewhere between sunrise and sunset, 2 golden hours, each set with 60 diamond minutes. No reward is offered, for they are gone forever. William Penn says time is what we want most, but what we use worst. Helen Hunt Jackson says when time is spent, eternity begins. Wow. It's a very powerful statement. You know, there's a book called Mahabharata. One day in the future, I'm going to share stories from that. But the narrator of the world is time. Time is the narrator because time gets to see all things. Everything in time is conquered. Yet time stands watching. You know how the ancients saw a sort of spirit to nature? I would say I entertain a spirit to time. A spirit of the authority of unknown moving the known. You see, there's certain things you can process, just like Helen Hunt Jackson says, when time is spent, eternity begins. When you have reached the edge of all that you can fathom as a manifest creature, you are left at a void. Now, most people, they stare at the void and there's no point to this. They come down. They climb down the mountain. But there are those who stare at there long enough and they're like, why is the void here? Why did I climb? Endless incarnations of time to be found on this mountain peak. Why now? And that is the roar of the greatest mystery on earth. So once you have entertained the realms of the conceivable remain, and that's the whole point. When you climb a mountain, the next peak is the sky, and the sky cannot be accessed with feet. So who knew? We have to actually build airplanes in the inner realms too. I'm joking. Ultimately, we are nature happening. We are all technically the planet. To ourselves, we are a part of the planet. But on an energetic level, I can't see how I'm separate from everything. That means there's a fascination with those who can control the elemental. And then there's a fascination to those who realize everything in their perception that is elemental is in view, is in attention. Once you notice the observer, what tends to occur is that I personally feel something occurs to the eyes. Now, I don't know, maybe in one talk, those who are regulars, maybe you've heard this, but something happens to the eyes of the person. That means many people don't see it. But like any person who speaks and you ask them a question, if they are looking at an inner landscape, that inner landscape is outside of them. What does that mean? That means if somebody asks me, okay, Mr. Within, remember, something you did 10 years ago, okay? So I'm in that moment. Let's say we're both in the park. We're both in the park, but in that moment, I see in front of me. So when you ask that question, I may look left at the ground to remember. You know. So it would be something where the eyes are seeing the visual behind, even though the subject has nothing to do with sight. You can close your eyes, open your eyes. The idea is there, untouched. Whatever we find in the manifest realm, all that we can do with it is put it into a story or live it. Live the truth or communicate it. Because the true energetic presence of the person is heartless to the personality. What does that mean? That means there are certain memories that can dissolve the need for identity. There's certain states of mind where the person can go into these non-dual states and stop being a thought. That means for the first time you have become the silence that was there before anything you could do. That means it's like suddenly somebody imagine right now we're in like this observable universe, but imagine this is still a dark room. We think we are seeing everything, but it's a dark room. And imagine suddenly the lights turn on. The shadows that we had entertained on the walls of a temporary species, it's as if those would fade. I keep thinking it's like an event. I keep asking, like, why do I have a physical body? Why is there hands and feet and a face? Why this? And there's this feeling deep down that it's to go somewhere. We are designed to get to something, but if it is conceptual, we suffer. So the only route is to honor the unknown and sincerely implement what you know. That's it. And the world's chess moves, if you're patient enough, become your teachers. There was a guru named, this yogi, I should say, named Papaji. He was in India, and he was this guy who was in the military, and he really took enlightenment seriously. In India, there's a much more open culture to that idea. And so the guy took it seriously. And what Papaji did was, with his military uniform, he would go into these temples of these self-claimed enlightened people, and he would say, "Show me God, and if you can show me, I will become your servant this whole life. But if you can't show me God, don't waste my time. And there were disciples in those temples who had been there for years, and they're like, hey man, you gotta practice for years. And Papaji was like a bulldozer. He's like, no, you show it to me right now if you know it, or you in some sense don't waste my time. And none of these sages could show it to him. And so, like a bulldozer, and he had a military uniform. Of course, he was just like nobody. But like, because he had the military uniform, there was this whole intimidation factor when he would, as if imagine somebody with a military uniform saying, what is enlightenment, what is true, So what happens is Papaji eventually, I don't know exactly if this was the first moment, but he eventually meets Ramana Maharshi, this sage who his story is pretty unique too, who at a young age pretty much lied down on the ground. Imagine a little kid trying to see what like not being is like, and he realized his true self since then. There's a story like that. So what happens is Papaji, he comes up to Ramana Maharshi and says, show me God. And Ramana Maharshi says, I cannot show it to you. God is not something you can show. And Papaji, this guy who like a bulldozer was looking for this truth, and he's like, why? And I believe I'll find the video, guys, and I'll post it here before I end the talk of this. But there was something that Ramana Maharshi was saying to Papaji, like a God that comes and goes is not the real God. So everything in this life you see comes and goes is not the real true nature. I would say time is an immortal concept, because without it, no other concepts could come. All our mortality is based on time. It's as if time doesn't end in the way we're looking at the world now as a species, but we do. Now, what happens if that was reversed? What if you never ended, the attention that is you, and time did? One can even ask, how is it possible to suffer in the changing world when the self is changing? It's never the same self suffering. So yesterday's suffering and tomorrow's suffering are not the same suffering, So what is suffering? There is no suffering. It's just suffering. I mean, in the inner realms, of course. Outer realm, I explained that at the beginning. It is its own system. Theophrastus says time is the most valuable thing a man can spend. Dario Fo says, know how to live the time that is given you. Confucius says, our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Martin Luther King Jr. says, the time is always right to do what is right. Wow. There's this quote from Oscar Wilde, guys. He says, education is an admirable thing, But it is well to remember from time to time that nothing is worth knowing, from time to time that nothing that is worth knowing can be taught. No, I read it right, yeah. That means not that is worth knowing can be taught. That means that which is worth truly knowing is not something that could be taught because it's experiential. That's the best way to... It's like, what is better? Somebody talking about fighting with a sword, or the person grabbing a sword and actually training? Like, imagine you were back in the day, you had to defend the kingdom or something. George Carlin says, some people see things that are and ask why. Some people dream of things that never were and ask why not. Some people have to go to work and don't have time for all that. It's like, we don't have time for suffering, guys. Who has the time to suffer nowadays? Michelangelo says, wow, there's no greater harm than that of time wasted. So think of it this way. Wasting your own time is harming your greatness. Leo Tolstoy says the two most powerful warriors are patience and time. Johnny Cash says you build on failure, you use it as a stepping stone. Close the door on the past. You don't try to forget the mistakes, but you don't dwell on it. You don't let it have any of your energy or any of your time or any of your space. Mark Twain says the fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time. That, by the way, Japanese Bushido and samurai. Who knew Mark Twain thought like a samurai? Mark Twain says, whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to pause and reflect. Maya Angelou, all great achievements require time. And Aristotle, anybody can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, and to the right degree and at the right time and for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power. It's not easy. Khalil Gibran says, I existed from all eternity, and behold, I am here. I shall exist till the end of time, for my being has no end. Wow. And guys, I'll end it off there, the quote tunnel. Seems like a quiet chant section, you know. That means I must have said something controversial. I don't know why I chose this wallpaper. There was something about it, about that, the girl looking at that street and kind of thinking as if, imagine if she jumped and she fell to the bottom of these skyscrapers, it would take her days to fall. Imagine that's how long, big skyscrapers have become. It's like we have to move, we have to use our existence. It's like the experiencer in the moment, the observer is the potential generator. It's like existence, experience moves in existence, existence moves as experience. So I feel that right now we are actually, perhaps, maybe, let's imagine, let's entertain hypothetically, let's say our human consciousness is an invisible sphere. Everybody is an invisible sphere right now around it. Everybody imagine there's an invisible sphere, and all of this human life is simulated inside the sphere. This sphere is not what's in it, and language is causing the attention to identify with what's in the sphere, simulated in the sphere, rather than realize it is the whole sphere, which is actually just like empty space is holding matter, an empty mind is holding a material body. Now, we are identifying with the body, the sounds it makes, and all of this. But to truly tap into the mysteries, like, I think I'm going to probably make this a project of mine to go interview Tai Chi masters, something like that. I think that would be nice. So, what's your relationship with energy? Sorry guys, I'm being a bit silly. If time is man-made, just like the idea of man, before the concept of man, there was something. That means the first definition is made from an awareness that there is the void. What does that mean? That means, imagine your psychology is like an Iron Man suit, and there had to be a moment where Tony Stark entered this Iron Man suit. The attention started suddenly going back to the earliest memory, just awakening in individualism. So the psychological establishment of the identity. Now, let's say the Iron Man suit was so advanced that it was aware Tony Stark was entering it. So it would say that the psychological, the identity of the person, which has become the leader of the mind's tribe of images. It's as if the first definition of meaning of something, the first definition of something was made from the void. It was an unknown acceptance. That means, just like we have like in history, there was the number 1, 2, 3, and so on, but the number 0 wasn't there. And somebody was like, I believe in India, they came up with the idea of 0. So that's the thing, that it was kind of like giving the void a permission to be in the room. So we have nothing, then we have something. We had an unknown, what could only be interpreted as nothing. I'm saying, like, before we created the word man, like mankind, before the idea of man, it's like the idea of man is, we can't say it's man-made. That's all I'm saying. So the idea of man is not man-made. It can't be. Because the idea of man didn't exist before. We are an unknown, invisible acceptance of form. Perhaps from the beginning even, we have all been minds. But the world has blindfolded itself in biology's commands. Imagine a young child says, "Why should I care for knowledge?" And simply because there are endless worlds waiting in the unknown to be revealed. And we are the most advanced instrument on this planet. And perhaps, there was this article that said human beings are using 12% of their brain. I believe that 88% potentially, even though I doubt the analysis, but I would say that 88% is not utilized as an individual being, as an individual doer. Conceptual access and mobility in the realm denies the rest. But if the person notices there is something here before the idea of here, that is enough. Everybody's mind is like, everybody's DNA, I would say, is like, we're all like the X-Men, but our powers are on a micro level. And so everybody has to cultivate, I don't know, pretty much communicate with your mind. So you can realize what it is serving. It could be a person, could be like, let's say a 50-year-old person could be serving an ideology when they were 15, for example. It could be. I'm saying as long as you identify with language, you will get pulled by something. So, this girl in the picture, I would say she is stuck in a game. And she knows it. And we are 8 billion creatures, I wouldn't say stuck, but we find ourselves on an island in a galaxy. The mysteries of the world must be marched towards. The unconscious needs to be made conscious, and pretty much the lion has to roar. This roar is a synchronization of how the world is accepted and how the inner realm self is not accepted. Imagine, I'm going to share a sci-fi setting here, sci-fi imagery. Imagine there was a cosmic king. And this cosmic king opened his eyes suddenly as a little kid on Earth. And so the memories, let us say, were intact. And so this cosmic king, when there was suffering or something occurring, imagine the attitude not being, "Oh, help me, universe, I'm suffering, I am weak," but the attitude being a command. as if the person is feeling uh, something and they command that emotion away, you know. I may have gone too far with the poetry, folks. I'll read something and I'll end off, and I'll start a Q&A right now in case people have questions. Guys, there's a quote from Nelson Mandela I will read for you. As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. Nelson Mandela is saying this. Nelson Mandela lived an intense life, but at least I think he realized that the most important value to any sort of leadership, if you cannot see what you are leading, you are your own destruction. And so it's like the sensitivity to human nature. Anytime that resurfaces, that shows itself, there is collective trust. You see, it's as if the next language is not going to be a language of, it's going to be a language of sensitivity to human experience. That means it's like it doesn't matter who you are, from where in the world you are. If you see someone suffering, someone crying, there's something there. There's some feeling that it's a human language. It's a language of evolutionary design. Even it's either we are individual before we are collective, or we are collective before we're individual. Society has had an imbalance of having the individual before the collective, and the collective has been accessed in the people's inner realms as through different ideological systems trying to become God for them. I will honestly say that the best thing is to, as if like, whether there is a religious narrative or whether there is no narrative, it's like the main effort is what is accessible should be attempted. I keep thinking about this idea that civilization can't change until behaviors are different. It just makes no sense. That if the behavior doesn't change, the result can't change. And so, how do you get 8 billion human beings who are alive, who every single one of them know deep down they're temporary and there's this massive emptiness waiting? So, then what becomes the point of now? there is a freedom that has to be fought for. And then there is a freedom that was there from the beginning. It was just forgotten. The freedom of the efficient eyes of man. So anyways, guys, time is definitely an interesting idea. I feel the educational system should force students at least once in one type of classroom to write an essay on what they think time is and what they think space is, you know. And that assignment will literally just push kids towards even trying to comprehend space-time and even being pulled towards the physical advancement of the realm. Really, the world can be found in so many ways, you know. When I look at this girl, do you know what I mean? Her comfort tells me it's as if she's like, her consciousness is not limited to her body. So for her, I think it doesn't matter. As if the moment we have a sort of cyberspace kind of digital abode where everybody can connect to, it's as if you don't care what happens in that abode when you know you're actually out here. So anyways, guys, I'm going to read this thing. And then we can go to Discord. This essay is from a book I wrote called The Source of Language. The title is The Universe is Glowing in Mysterious Ways. If I ever could meet Steve Jobs for the first time, I would walk up to him and give him an apple and say I saw the creator of Apple, so I thought I would give him an apple. Who created this apple? And Steve would most likely say in the back of his mind, this universe is glowing in mysterious ways. Enlightenment is not a hierarchical stairway to heaven. It is just that when you're fully aware of how the light of existence is being origin and was always what it is, the enlightened are those who through their own self are aware of the here and now, always who through their own self are aware of the here and now, always or aware that here and now always is what it is. You are free before the idea of repetition. You are beyond the bodies of ignorance. What you are does not need to remember what it is already being. Self-discovering your true nature is self-realizing the nature of the universe. Consciousness is everywhere, and everywhere is receiving the whole moment, like how the light of a candle lights up a dark room and creates many universes of shadows, but only for a little while. As attention increases our hearing, attention to the source of language and the origin of the self will increase our remembrance to hear our true nature, that is, an untouchable, collectively existent, unified consciousness. Is there a God? Only when you realize you're being everything at once. Beyond thought, there are no thoughts, and when space is crumbled into the one and only intelligence of the universal presence, symbols are no longer needed for navigation. There is no time to consider. The ocean in the drop already knows where it is. To find for yourself the meaning of terms beyond vague, abstract, conceptual agreement. The light in your eyes has no the light in your eyes has no questions for the sun that it is simultaneously being an emanation of. Above thought, the purity of sincere experience will always be synchronistically in parallel with the great realization of the essence of the natural world. That you are not and never were separate from life, for you are life. The question is only egotistical value in the realm of language, which is founded upon duality and that which is in formation. Language is the orbiting abstraction around the form accepted by an unchanging attention to it. What is your experience of self in deep sleep? In deep sleep, are you a good person or are you a bad person? Can the unconscious be defined by the conscious, or is the conscious an emanation of the absolute unconsciousness? Robert M. Pirsig says we take a handful of sand from the endless landscape of the awareness around us and call that handful of sand the world. If all that your perception was and is aware of was a handful of sand, whose hand is holding all conception in your experience? And is it an individual idea or a collective realization? In a universe of 1 billion trillion stars, how important is the study of no thing? This must be said, language is not the greatest technology man has ever developed, even though a person of only objective belief must think so. The greatest technology is and can be remembered as self-awareness. This word for some will be a divine gift, for others will be an empty box. The intelligence of your true I scrolled the moment. The intelligence of your true essence cannot be ignored. Just like how Mr.Within for the first time has brought forth the idea that every student in his school must each plant a tree every year. If you don't plant trees, you can't graduate to the next stage. Intelligence is being aligned and in tune with all of life that is happening now. Consider it as so that there requires to be two self-realizations about the nature of existence, for simplicity of direct experience's essence and for the source of language to be truly revealed. The two self-realizations can be, for the sake of language, be categorized as physical, in quotations, and non-physical, in quotations. The interesting thing about the two types of self-realizations is that they share the same result. At the end of both of them, you're in the same state as you have always been. But through the revelation of humble and sincere direct experience, the fruit of these revelations is beyond ideology's grasp. Their nectar is absorbed beyond space and time. The physical self-realization is the suggestion that the universe is changing and the emptiness of fixed temporal ideas is immediately confronted. No one lives physically forever. The non-physical self-realization is about the self-inquiry into the nature of thought, which can metaphorically be considered to be a subtle thought-body that grows through the use and attention of language. Have you noticed we think in words? Have you noticed the skeleton of our imagination is structured through the vast multidimensional convergence of a lettering system? The non-physical self-realization is the suggestion that the universe of your thoughts, imagination, and abstract relative identities are hollow as well, as if the two realizations, just like the space of any conceptual agreement and identity, are empty before full. The emptiness of the seer reveals the unspeakable nature of the experience of conscious being. Remember the drop already being in the ocean analogy. It is already the ocean. If you were an eternal being, how would life be the creation of your attention? Does eternity need to be mindful of its expression? The language we speak for the first time creates the world in that way. All communication evokes life intelligence. How much meditation does a person need enough to realize they are the absolute? All star seeds already know the growth of their design. When you can close your eyes without closing your eyes, playfully said, you're enlightened. What truth could possibly have not revealed itself yet when you are being it? Everything we have ever done, is a creative design for memory. How could existence not exist? How could non-existence exist? Have you found the edges of your world beyond thought? Truth is a silent reunion with all that is. When technology remembers itself, the mind of God could never be measured through cut up and dividing units. If the cosmos could speak in an instant, it would say, "Rise, mankind, rise. Rise up to the greatest revelation and beacon of your true nature that is now." When the world is a catalyst, do not be delayed by the know-how. Free thought from itself, as if there never was a thinker, where there is an unspeakable awareness to the thinker, which cannot be the thinker that is aware it is thinking. The moment shall reveal to you its omnipotence. And as tears of eternal bliss arise in your consciousness, the identity of self suddenly realizes it could never be identified with anything. In that moment, you are the empty and full awareness of the moment, and experiential and directly bestowed the result of your humility, in the sense that you are listened to your heart, in the sense that as you listened to your heart of hearts, the soul of souls remembered itself to all of us, beyond a dying or changing moment that could possibly be compared. The one and only will suddenly realize it is the only one, the only intelligence that has given the view of existence, birth, and death through every memory. Okay, I gotta read that again. The one and only will suddenly realize it is the only one, the only intelligence that has given the view of existence, birth, and death, and through every memory will notice God or the undying intent, emptiness within all. the undying intent of emptiness within all. Once Superman has self-realized the super soul and the Atman beyond any superpowers, once Superman has self-realized the super soul and the Atman beyond any superpowers, there will be no Superman. Oh, how beautiful is this changing world. And that's how the essay ends. Okay, so Q&A, guys. David says, what is the future of romantic relationships? Well, I gotta first ask you, how do you define a romantic relationship? Do you mean happy? Or do you imagine David, you're like, what is that? I wanted to make a joke, but whatever. Here's my honest opinion. Wherever your attention goes, you will find yourself there at some point. So it depends. Depends if the person is willing to walk that way. If you're willing to walk that way, there could be endless, you know. One can see romance even on so many levels. You know, a romantic relationship, you know, you ask the mystic back in the day, their poetry was as if they were like in love with the supreme state of how there is something even moving you. I would say, as long as you care for the unknown world behind the eyes of your partner, romance isn't dead. So that's the future. When you care for that living mind, then there is, I guess, a vulnerability that the new is made together, but I don't know. I would say this would be a good Discord topic. Let's just make this a Discord topic. Get it. Full school of Athens. Sharing ideas on it. I would say, if it's a romantic relationship, the future of it is love. That's the that just, I don't even have to think about the statement you've said, romantic relationship. So the relationship is already romantic. So what is the future of a romantic relationship? Oh, you mean it in the sense of like, okay, depends if you're good at chess. That's the I would say the future of romantic relationships is children. That's the future. If this was a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game show, my final answer would be children, Dave. That's the future of romantic relationships. That the romantic human beings pass down romantic human beings into humanity, you know. The eternalization of the romance, because that's what it is. It's as if there is something more than the self. And I would say that's the power of love. Love is really depicted in soap operas in a sort of fluffy way, but its power is that it is in some sense uh, an ultimate. It is an ultimate. Uh, it's an ultimate possession, but it's the possession of your next truth within what you have seen in front of your eyes. So I would not say it in a sort of, I'm not using the term possession in the religious context. I'm just saying something holding something, as if like the attention is drawn, as if the person, you know how they say like some people who are not in the zone, they're like, oh, look at this person, he's probably in love, you know? You know? I would say the word romance is when souls are getting to know one another. It's as if it's after a dimension of the real selves in place, I would say. So if you are not being you, then it's like um, the romance is hollow. It's like, who is the romance? Do you know what I mean? Like there's something that it's the nature and the unknown is required. But anyways, anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll be on Discord for those interested. Much blessings, and I must say. And is time causing suffering? No, it's just watching suffering. It's not causing it. I feel we are causing our subjective pain because it's how the antenna accepts the signal. How all these senses being received, they become something. There's something there. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening.